After traveling back from China recently on my 2025 trip, I wanted to make this video ASAP because there's so many recent updates that help foreigners travel to China, especially for your very first time.
So let's get straight into it.
Alright, so this segues into apps. Let's talk about what apps you need. Now, for the most part, you only need two major apps, Alipay and WeChat. Now, Alipay is much better than WeChat in my opinion from UI, UX, and just general foreign friendly. However, I like to get both because just in case for some reason your Alipay verification starts failing or something, then you can rely on another method to get around. So for the most part, I actually have WeChat as more of a backup, but Alipay as the main source of the big app. Now, this is the major app you're gonna use, and this is why. Alipay has a thing, or WeChat as well, called mini apps. Mini apps are just basically apps that are just embedded into Alipay. So imagine Uber Eats in Uber. So you can go on your Uber app and you can like basically order food from it as well, instead of downloading Uber Eats as a standalone app. And I'm sure for those Southeast Asia countries, for example, Grab, similar situations, Gojek, etc. Now, the reason why this is such a big feature is because not only don't you have to download all these mini or all these other apps standalone, now the biggest reason you download this, apart from the mini app situation, is the fact that Alipay and WeChat get around this. You can add your international card. Now, the biggest thing to do before you leave is to verify fully. Update your passports, your numbers and stuff like that, because you'll need it, and I'll go through why. Which kind of segues me to my first initial mini app, or the first mini app I want to talk about is Didi. Didi is China's equivalent of Uber. Now with Didi, the most important part is you need to verify your number. A lot of drivers, when you hop in, will simply say your number, like Wu Liu Bai Bai or something like that. My Mandarin is not very good, but either way, you don't really need to understand it. I mean, it's good to just understand. It might just be research, like if your number is 5688, then Wu Liu Bai Bai, just remember it. So if you hear it, you say yes, or like you can just say yes, like just say yes, and they just get it. Because all they need to do is verify that you are that person hopping in. So in China, they use a number system. Sometimes in Western countries, they'll ask if your name, like, oh, are you Richard? Then yes, and okay, go on. But China uses a number system, so just expect that will happen. And the beauty of Didi, especially on the mini app, is that it accepts English translations. So for example, if you need to go to Shanghai subway, you just type in that in English, as long as the destination has an English name. Because a lot of times, a lot of these other apps, you need to type in the Chinese characters, which sometimes can be a bit hard, but you have to translate it, and it's a bit annoying. So this is just an easy way to get around. And for the most part, Didi is really cheap in China, in my opinion. It's super cheap for the most part, especially if you're coming from a Western country. So I use Didi a lot to travel, to be honest. So definitely check it out, an easy way to get around. Now, the second app, which is not really an app, it's more of an inbuilt service, is the payment systems. Now, you might have heard of it. Okay, you have to buy everything in China with Alipay and WeChat, and it is true. For the most part, when I first went back to China, I tried using my card as much as possible to see how often I could use it. And for the most part, I couldn't. Like, I was like one big retailer that allowed it. Everywhere else asked for WeChat, Alipay. They didn't have card services set up. And if they did, it was like Union Pay, and it wasn't Visa or MasterCard. So you need to make sure you have your AliChat and WeChat Pay all set up. And this is really important, especially when I talked about the verification. You need to verify this. Make sure everything is fully verified because, for example, with Alipay, you need to have your number verified. They even ask for your occupation, etc. Make sure that is all verified. If you don't, you're gonna run into an issue where you won't be able to pay for things. So do this before you leave. Now, how it works is pretty simple. There's two ways to pay. One is you get this QR code and scanner, and they'll just scan it, and then it just takes the money, and that's it. The other way, which is a bit more complicated and more common for smaller retailers who might not have this set up, is they'll have a QR code and you scan it with the app, and then the payment thing will come up on the app and you just pay for it. So it's pretty simple. Like you'll just do it once and you'll understand it. So overall, pretty easy. Now, the final app I want to talk about is 12306, which is a public transportation app that you can book trains, like even like your bullet trains or just local metros on the app. It's pretty straightforward, but this requires a passport verification, adds another layer of verification, which is why I said you should just do all these verifications right now before you leave to China. Now, this app is Chinese in the actual app itself, even the mini app, but what's really the beautiful part of Alipay and WeChat is you can click the translate button and it translates the app. Yes, it takes a bit of time to go through each page, and the beauty of having these inbuilt translations is you don't have to then take screenshots or stuff and try to translate each page. Now you can just go through the app and just go through each page and translate it, which is super useful. Now the rest of the app is pretty straightforward. Apart from the passport verification, just input where you need to go, and generally it's pretty straightforward. If you want, you can buy a public transportation card, but once again you need passport verification and stuff like that, so I will just use Alipay. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so that's about it for in my opinion, the apps you really need to use. You can use the food delivery apps like Meituan in the actual app. Sorry if I'm butchering all the Chinese, I'm not actually very fluent in Mando. However, you could use it, but it's not really essential. But if you do use it, you can use it, and you can use the inbuilt translating system. And I'll put a list below of what potential mini apps you can check out, but they're not, in my opinion, essential for traveling around China, which is why I'm not going to go through those. All right, so now let's talk about eSIMs. Now, a lot of the times I've seen, and I did a lot of research around this, people trying to buy local SIM cards or eSIMs like through Airlo, Nomad, etc. However, I got an easy solution. Once again, this is through Alipay, and you just have to scroll to the eSIM section and you just buy the eSIM from trip.com, which is an embedded service. I'm not sure how they link it properly, but it's just how it is. You buy the eSIM and it works perfectly for two reasons. One, it's way cheaper than Airlo, Nomad, etc. It's just those apps are super expensive compared to what you can get with Alipay's. So I'll do a comparison here of how much each one, and you can see how much of a difference you're going to save through buying the eSIM for Alipay. Now, the second biggest reason is you don't need a VPN. Yes, you don't need a VPN if you use vSIM cards, especially these eSIMs. If you buy a local SIM card, you're going to have to pair it with a VPN, which I'll talk about in a second. However, if you just buy an eSIM, you can simply just do this, and it's super straightforward. I bought it, I used it. It worked really well in China, to be honest. Connectivity was good, so definitely go this way. And I've tested it and it's worked pretty well. Make sure you just have the installation instructions. Just install it beforehand, don't activate it. For me, it was pretty simple. I just activated it and it worked. You might run into hiccups. They have a little guide on potential troubleshooting things you might run into, but pretty straightforward. All right, so let's talk about VPNs. You'll still need a VPN if you're using a hotel Wi-Fi and you want to just sit in bed and watch like a movie for an hour or two, and that will eat into your internet data that's allocated to your eSIM. So if you don't want to do that, you'd still need a VPN. Now with VPN, my recommendation is Let's VPN. Unfortunately, your international VPNs like ExpressVPN and NordVPN don't work really well in China, so you need more of a local VPN, and Let's VPN is probably the best option because one, it's pretty cheap, and two, it's trusted and it's actually reliable compared to a lot of other VPNs. To give a view on cost, it's around $2 USD for a week, and here's a pricing chart here. So overall, it's pretty affordable, and you can add a couple of devices. So if you're traveling with a partner, you can add both of your devices on it, and you can just watch stuff in bed if you want. So that's my recommendation for VPNs. Hopefully it works for you. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly talk about hotel bookings as well. Now, China has a bit of a weird thing where some hotels don't allow foreigners. And sometimes you'll run into a situation if you try to book locally that the hotels won't even accept your foreign passport. To get around this, for the most part, just book through booking.com or Expedia. And yes, it's not the optimal way sometimes because sometimes people just love booking local hotels because it's cheaper, but you don't want to be locked out of your hotel when you arrive, right? So for the most part, just go to booking.com and just take a look at the reviews, make sure there are other foreigners staying, and then book it through those channels instead, just to be safe. All right, so let's talk about booking restaurants as another topic. Now, for the most part, booking restaurants is a bit annoying in China. For the most part, you're meant to call them and then reserve, but for the most part, if you're trying to book local restaurants, they might not speak English. The second thing is you have to use an app called Dianping, but it is in Chinese as well. So you are kind of left out with a lot of no options, right? So there are two ways to get around this. One, and the biggest, easiest way is to use a hotel concierge. And this is one of the reasons why you want to book a hotel with a concierge service. Now, I even reached out before I even went to the hotel, and even though they're a bit hesitant, they wanted me to stay at the restaurant first. To stay at the hotel first, they still did the bookings for me, and I just went for my concierge and did that. The second reason or second way you might be able to get around is simply through finding the restaurant in WeChat and just messaging directly. However, I found the concierge way a bit more guaranteed because they will just do the calling and ask you, and then they'll let you know if the booking's successful. For the most part, just do the reservations through the phone, through your concierge service at a hotel. Final thing I wanted to cover off is visa-free entry. Now, some countries like Australia and Southeast Asia have visa-free entry requirements right now. You don't need a visa, which is super great. You just have to fill in a little form as you land, and then that's it. So double check on your visa entry requirements. Things have changed recently. Just hope that your country is in the visa-free I guess, agreement. If not, you do have to do the visa, which can be complicated. But either way, just double check, because you do need a visa for a lot of countries. But right now, it's pretty relaxed because China's trying to bring foreigners and tourists in right now. And that's it. Hopefully I covered up pretty much most of the topics that you'll need to stay in China. Hopefully this video helps a lot. Leave a comment below if I've missed anything important. But right now, China is in the most optimal spot for traveling for foreigners. Like, if you went to China even just a couple years ago, none of these things will exist, or maybe a couple would, and it was super hard to travel. So honestly, this is a great time to go to China right now. So hopefully this video helps, and I'll be releasing more content on China as well. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.